Good morning. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, June 27th, 2024, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, June 13th, 2024, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, June 13, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 11. Commissioner Nieto is recused from discussion on agenda item 12, and Chairperson Strand and Commissioner Hawkins have informed me there is no need to discuss the draft order to reopen notice and request for comment associated with agenda item 12. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 13, approving the final statement of scope and directing commission staff to continue the rulemaking process. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 14, approving the multi-party facilities construction agreement and guarantee and/or letter of credit transaction for the High Noon Solar Energy Project between American Transmission Company and Wisconsin Electric Power Company as proposed, with all 7 of the conditions listed in the memorandum dated June 6, 2024, and delegating authority to the administrator for the Division of Energy Regulation and Analysis to issue final decisions related to future multi-party facilities, construction agreements, and associated letters of credit with standard terms and subject to the same conditions imposed, including Condition 7, when additional approval is required to acquire and/or construct the energy facility. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 16, approving the 2024 report for the submittal to the governor and legislature as required by statute, or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 17, accepting the reports of Wisconsin electric providers and aggregators regarding compliance with the requirements of WISSTAT subsection 196.378 sub 2 sub A2, and directing the Division of Energy Regulation and Analysis to inform each electric provider and aggregator of its compliance with the statute.
All right, I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And I move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 7 through 11.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I move item 12, approval of the draft order to reopen notice and request for comment in docket number 9300 DR 106.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And I move we approve in docket 1 AC 259, the proposed statement of scope for the revision of WIS Admin Code Chapter PSC 114.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And in docket 5 AE 252, I move we approve with conditions the multi-party facilities construction agreement between American Transmission Company, LLC, and Wisconsin Electric Power Company for the High Noon Solar Project, and authorize the delegation as read by the Secretary.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our first discussion item today, which is agenda number 15, docket 5 ES 112, which is the strategic energy assessment for the state from January 1st of 2024 through December 31st of 2030. So under Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 2, the commission must biennially evaluate the adequacy and reliability of the state's current and future electrical supply and issue a report called the Strategic Energy Assessment, or SEA. The process for releasing the final SEA report involves a number of steps, and today the commission is only considering whether to approve the draft SEA and release it for public comment and hearing, which is the next step in that process. Because the report is in draft form as in intended to go out for comment, I don't have any specific statements at this time, other than to thank commission staff for their hard work in drafting the draft report. This is a significant undertaking, and I really appreciate their diligence. I do look forward to receiving comments on the report and reviewing those comments in advance of issuing the final SEA report, which is due 90 days after the hearing's held. It's important that we stay on this timeline, and action today will keep us on it. So that being said, I am at alternative 1 for this item, which is to approve the SEA draft and direct commission staff to release it for public comment and hearing. And now I'll let Commissioner Nato and Commissioner Hawkins weigh in on any comments that they may have.
Thank you, Chair Strand. I don't have any additional comments. Also looking forward to the comments we will receive on the draft, and I was also at approve and release the draft for comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. I also want to echo the thanks to staff for getting the draft to this point, and I'm looking forward to the comments from the public. This is a really critical piece of resource planning in our state and understanding where the resource mix is going to evolve. And so I did have one suggested edit, and it's very minor, and it's in section 2 of the executive summary talking about the future electric generation in Wisconsin, and it just talks about different resource types that could change the dynamics of resource planning in the future, and it only mentions one. It mentions long-duration energy storage, and I would just like to see the inclusion of advanced nuclear in that section as well. It talks about, it says the plans of our state may change, with the cost of different technologies, and then it just lists one example. And I was just going to suggest an additional technology be included there, and that technology be advanced nuclear. And so I was at alternative 2 because I would like to see that modification in that paragraph. I'm not dead set on it because I know we're going to get comments, but I just wanted to flag that as an area that I was interested in.
Yeah, thank you so much for flagging it. I'm also interested in that area, especially if you read Business from this week. And I appreciate your comments on the issue and you know, your detailed review of the draft SEA. I would still like to stay at alternative 1 just so we can keep it moving. Again, like the next phase in the process is when we're going to hear feedback and comments, which advancement of nuclear technologies can be included in that, but we also need to keep things moving and keep it on track. So I think appropriately that will be addressed. Thank you for sending the message in the next phase of the process. So if we're ready, I think we'll probably take a motion on this one.
Okay. I can stay at alternative 1 as well. And I also agree with Commissioner Hawkins' addition into the final, and I do think that should be listed as an example. And if process-wise the step is to move it forward and make sure that's included in the final, that's fine with me as well. So in docket 5 ES 112, I move that we approve the draft SEA and direct commission staff to release it for public comment and hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to our next discussion item today, which is number 18. Oh, 17, sorry. Apparently going back to 17. Oh, yeah. So in docket 4220 AF 112, this is an application of Northern States Power Company, Wisconsin, for approval of certain accounting treatment due to the interchange agreement that they are a party to. So we'll begin our discussion today on that. So NSPW is requesting authorization to codify an exception to this commission's Uniform System of Accounts, or USOA, to record all pre-certification costs to construction work in progress, or QUIP, in order to be consistent with FERC accounting rules and the applicant's interchange agreement. As noted in its application, NSPW is unique compared to its peer utilities in Wisconsin due to the interchange agreement it is in with NSPM, or Northern States Power Company, Minnesota. So NSPW and NSPM, who are collectively known as the NSP companies, plan, build, and operate a single integrated electric production and transmission system, which is known as the NSP system, according to provisions of a FERC-approved interchange agreement. Each generation and transmission resource in the NSP system was developed in consideration of the needs of the entire 5-state NSP system, and the customers of the NSP companies do benefit from the diversity of resources that serve the NSP system. In this case before us, the interchange agreement and its parties, including NSPW, is governed by FERC due to the interstate production and transmission nature of the agreement. Within the FERC-approved interchange agreement, there is a tariff that prescribes the cost-sharing mechanism for the NSP system production and transmission costs. Because NSPW's production and transmission costs are shared with NSPM through the interchange agreement, NSPW has historically followed the FERC Uniform System of Accounting, or accounts, for those costs shared through the interchange agreement. Here, the applicant maintains that its customers have benefited from its use of the FERC USOA for pre-certification costs. These costs stem from the structure of the FERC authorized interchange agreement in which NSPW and NSPM agreed to share costs recorded to production and transmission at a cost allocation of 16% to Wisconsin ratepayers and 84% to Minnesota ratepayers. Under this commission's USOA, PSC accounts 558 and 578 are for pre-certification expenses. However, these PSC accounts are not recognized in the FERC USOA, and therefore, the associated costs are not included in the interchange agreement. According to the applicant, this means that any costs booked to PSC accounts 558 and 578 could be borne solely by NSPW and its customers and not shared with NSPM and its customers. Restated, in the absence of FERC recognition of these accounts and imposition of the cost share articulated in the interchange agreement, this accounting difference could result in NSPW's customers paying 100% of these pre-certification costs rather than paying 16% of these pre-certification costs under the interchange agreement if FERC USOA is used. This decision gives us an opportunity to step back and recognize the uniqueness of the issue before us, to keep an open mind with an eye toward flexibility, and to issue a decision that's in the best interest of Wisconsin ratepayers while aligning more cleanly with the governing interchange agreement and applicable regulatory bodies' accounting practices. While I give great weight to commission precedent, consistency in similar decision items, and adherence to accepted commission practices, where there is opportunity to inject flexibility in unique situation that won't result in an unreasonable treatment of costs and may protect ratepayers, I think we need to consider that, and it's important to do so. Often, government entities are seen as making unreasonable or impractical decisions simply because it's how things have always been done or to uphold the status quo. However, where we can, I think we need to do better, and this is an opportunity for that. Given the record before us and the unique nature of the interchange agreement, I think this is an instance where we can demonstrate that there's not a one-size-fits-all, we've always done it this way approach to carrying out minor aspects of our broad regulatory responsibilities. Here, the applicant is not asking for an entirely new or different accounting approach. They are merely requesting to follow the federal government's accounting method, which is appropriate due to FERC's oversight of their interchange agreement. This will not open a floodgate of exceptions to the PSC of Wisconsin's USOA, nor will it impact other utilities in the state because only NSPW is part of a unique interchange agreement. For these reasons, I am thoroughly convinced that an exception as requested by the applicant is reasonable, and therefore for the accounting treatment exception decision item in this, I am at alternative 1, which would approve the applicant's request for an exception to the Commission's USOA to record all pre-certification costs to QIP consistent with FERC accounting rules and the applicant's interchange agreement. So before we move on, I'll let Commissioner Nieto and Commissioner Hawkins weigh in on this decision item.
Thank you, Chair Strand. I thank you for the good introduction, and I agree with the points that you made. The only thing I would add is that I think I would be at an alternative 2 to approve with a slight modification or a minor condition, essentially. I agree with all of the reasons for the approval. I wasn't necessarily at a permanent exception to the USOA at this point, and I thought one thing that could be useful would be to limit this to a 2-year exception to allow us to get through the current construction and rate case cycles and give a little bit of time for staff to work further with the applicant. There may be some other accounting pathways, tariff amendment type pathways to permanently resolve this discrepancy without needing kind of a permanent standing exception to the USOA. And I think there hasn't been sufficient opportunity to kind of delve into that so far. And I thought giving 2 years would give everybody plenty of time to explore that and would also produce that just kind of reasonable, practical result. And if nothing comes out of that, the applicant could always come back and renew the exception. So I'd be at modifying to have the exception go for 2 years from the date of the order and having the applicant work with staff in the meantime on exploring some of those potential alternatives.
Sorry, Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair Strand. Yeah, originally I was at alternative 1 on this one as well, and I'll note that in the applicant's documents, they stated that the costs, if following the Wisconsin approach, could all fall on Wisconsin ratepayers, but it wasn't a 100% certainty, and so maybe doing some of that additional work with staff could find other avenues. I don't know if I necessarily have strong opinions on whether or not that has to happen, but it seems reasonable to me. So I could join Commissioner Nieto there for the two-year exemption. Would be interested, Chair Strand, if you have strong feelings on that, but I could likely go either way on this one.
Thank you. I actually do have strong feelings on it. I think if the term of the interchange agreement was 2 years or specified, then it might be appropriate to approve the exception to run with the term of that interchange agreement. But I think approving the permanent exception is more aligned with the fact that FERC governs the IA, including whether or not there's a term. That's up to FERC. FERC is the regulatory body that handles the interchange agreement. I think that the permanent exception also provides a lot more certainty. And I think, again, in a regulatory environment where certainty can be provided, it's helpful. Also, coming back in 2 years is, I don't know that the situation is going to change significantly again, because I don't think the interchange agreement is going to change significantly within 2 years. So I don't like to create extra work or overburden our utilities, given the amount of applications and things that we know that we have coming through the pipeline here at the commission. So I'm going to stay at alternative 1 for those reasons.
And Commissioner Nieto, do you see any potential upsides in what might be discovered in the next 2 years that you were thinking about as a hypothetical potentially that could help me better understand your position?
Yeah, thanks for the question. My understanding from staff is there may be accounting avenues to address this discrepancy that don't necessarily require an exemption from the USOA, and that would still align with the FERC requirements and the interchange agreement. But to this point, there hasn't been sufficient time essentially for staff to really delve into those discussions in the weeds. It's more, they see a potential for that as a mechanism and something that they would be able to explore with the applicant and see whether or not those are viable under the FERC requirements and the interchange agreement. So I think as well too, just in terms of a 2-year versus permanent and that kind of thing, to me, it was more about keeping open those additional avenues of exploration and making sure that this exemption is necessary, as opposed to finding an accounting mechanism to rectify everything. And so another option could potentially be not having the exception become void in 2 years, but still having the applicant and staff discuss and work together. Just throwing that out there for you too as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. That helps my understanding. And in my conversations with staff, we kind of got into some of that as well. And I think I'm in agreement here with Chair Strand on the fact that the IA isn't going to change, the FERC system of accounting isn't going to change, and so I'm not seeing enough of an upside in finding those other accounting mechanisms to really convince me that we shouldn't just make this the way we treat this one utility in Wisconsin, given the unique nature of the IA. So I'm going to stay at alternative 1 on this one.
Thank you for the discussion. I agree with Commissioner Hawkins that I don't think it's necessary for us to search for accounting mechanisms or review them every 2 years in 2 years when the FERC accounting process works. And also, I don't think, like I said earlier, that this decision has wide-ranging implications. I think allowing this exception is not forcing us to abandon our commission's USOA or calling its efficacy or continued use into question. I think instead we're just providing flexibility and maybe a more certain rate impact information to NSPW based on the uniqueness of the interstate agreement. So, okay, alternative 1, we can take a motion and a vote on that if we need to.
Yep, and I can join you both there for this item.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is, because we are at alternative one for this one, we don't need to weigh in on the request for deferral accounting decision item, which means we are now at the request for the AFUDC accounting treatment decision item, just so we're clear on that. So in addition to the request for certain accounting treatment on pre-certification costs, the applicant is also requesting to record all pre-construction costs to QUIP and accrue AFUDC on 100% of the pre-construction QUIP balance at the weighted average cost of capital. Although this deferral docket may be a unique venue to take up this type of request, that alone is not a reason to deny this request. In fact, the substance of the request is consistent with commission precedent of what has been granted in rate proceedings. For example, our memo specifically references the 3270 UR 125 rate case proceeding where the commission authorized MG&E to accrue AFUDC on 100% of QUIP associated with projects requiring a CA or CPCN upon approval of the CA or CPCN. So because this request is consistent with past commission decision items, I am at alternative one, which would be to approve the applicant's request to accrue AFUDC on 100% of the pre-construction QUIP balances at the WACC, or weighted average cost of capital, for projects requiring a CA or a CPCN. Commissioner Nieto.
For this one, similarly, I was also at approve, but at approve with a modification condition, similar to the first discussion item, even though these two aren't necessarily connected. To your point, Chair Strand, we've authorized this for other utilities, including MG&E and Power and Light. Both of those do have an expiration date of December 31st, 2025 for their approvals. So instead of approving this accounting treatment request into perpetuity, I would align it with MG&E's and WPL's authorizations and have that also set until December 31st, 2025. And those utilities are asking to renew the treatment as part of the regular course of rate cases, and NSPW is on the same rate case schedule as those two utilities as well.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you both. I was originally at alternative one, and Commissioner Nieto, thanks for sharing that additional information. And Chair Strand pointed out that this is a limited, case, so maybe taking it up in a broader rate case proceeding makes sense. So I could certainly join you at the alternative two with your suggested condition that you discussed. And so that's with the timeline, the same timeline as MG&E and Power and Light.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, I'll join Commissioner Nieto at alternative two there.
Is there any harm? Okay, so the deadline of December 31st, 2025 is set for the other utilities because of the rate case period of time, right? So they asked for it, it was set, it expires then because it runs with the 2-year rate case. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
So is there harm if NSPW only if theirs ends before that? It ends at the time that the rate case schedule, right? 31st, 2025. I get that. But is there harm in that they were not granted this, or that theirs is a shorter term, since technically it ran for 2 years for the other two? Is there harm in that it's only running from now until the end of December 31st, 2025? Or it's okay because it's consistent with?
It would be consistent,
Yep.
right?
Okay.
I think there would be
Great.
greater potential harm if
If
it
it
continues in
yes.
perpetuity
Yep.
and the commission then,
Got it.
in the review of the others, decides to change it.
Yep.
So this would just kind of keep that.
Trued up to
Yeah,
the proper
exactly.
timeline. Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Yes, I think that it's an important note that Commissioner Nieto made regarding permanency versus for a specific amount of time. So I can join you guys that too. That's fine.
In docket 4220 AF 112, I move that we approve the request consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our final decision item for today, which is agenda number 19. Docket 6630 AF 101, which is the application of the Wisconsin Electric Power Company for approval of deferral accounting treatment of increased forestry activity in response to continued severe storms. Okay, so This application is requesting to defer costs associated with proposed increased forestry activity in response to continued severe storms and impacts related to the emerald ash borer infestation. The applicant is seeking permission to defer any storm restoration costs incurred during 2024 in excess of the $8.5 million authorized for 2024 storm costs. The applicant is also seeking authorization to defer up to an additional $25 million in 2024 to accelerate forestry efforts to prevent future widespread outages and improve reliability. This application garnered attention from various groups, and 6 parties were granted intervention status: the Citizens Utility Board, the Utility Workers Coalition, the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 420, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers and Local Union 2150, the Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group, and the City of Milwaukee. I would like to thank Commission staff for their work on this docket, as well as the applicant and interveners for their participation. And just want to note, as kind of a helpful guide to our discussion, that the Commission staff memo did outline several deferral-related decision items for us to consider, some of which are only applicable if certain alternatives are chosen. So the decision items that are before us today include the deferral request for acceleration in forestry work spend, the future storm damage deferral request, a January 2024 storm-specific damage deferral request, which is only applicable if the future storm damage deferral is not approved, carrying costs, which is only applicable if any of the deferrals are approved, and standard order conditions imposed in past deferral accounting treatment orders, which again is only applicable if any of the deferrals are approved. So before we walk through our decisions on these points, I will provide a very brief summary of the application. So currently, the applicant is authorized to recover approximately $19 million annually for forestry work. The applicant indicated that this amount is insufficient to keep up with threats posed by severe weather and the emerald ash borer infestation. According to the applicant, recent severe weather events have resulted in historically high numbers of customer outages. They maintain that severe weather events have caused widespread damage to their facilities, which resulted in extended outages for tens of thousands of customers. Specifically, the January 12th through 14th, 2024 storm cost approximately $9.5 million, which is more than the applicant's entire budget for 2024 storm restoration of $8.5 million. Therefore, the applicant is seeking to defer any storm restoration costs in 2024 that exceed the $8.5 million it is currently authorized to recover in 2024. In addition to severe weather, the applicant noted a growing challenge in its effort to protect its electric distribution system from the emerald ash borer beetle. The applicant estimates approximately 30% of the over 150,000 ash trees near its overhead lines will become dead or hazardous due to the EAB within the next 5 to 10 years, which would make these trees susceptible to wind damage. The applicant indicated that it intends to expend some portion of the additional $25 million sought to target certain areas outside of its historic tree trimming zone. This strategy would include removing hazard tree limbs and hazard trees that are outside of the applicant's current trimming zone, but close enough to facilities to cause an outage if the tree fell on the applicant's distribution facilities. The application noted that despite spending more on forestry work than had been authorized for the past several years, the reliability metrics have regressed from 2017 to 2022. I think it's important to note that the applicant did indicate that it plans to seek a significant increase in authorized revenues for forestry, approximately $43 million, in its 2025 test year rate case in docket 5 UR 111. As a commissioner, I'm interested in ensuring that our regulated utilities provide reliable service to their customers, but I'm also interested in ensuring that those utility services are affordable. This work may increase reliability, but the associated expenses could cause additional rate pressure, which warrants thoughtful review and analysis. Further, our staff noted that it's not typical commission practice to increase budgets like these outside of a rate application. So in future rate cases, the applicant may request, which we've heard they will, a higher forestry authorized revenue requirement for the forward-looking test year. So when we are evaluating the reasonableness of deferral requests, we have a commission policy, SOP 9401, which outlines the criteria. The first is if the amount is outside control of the utility. Second, expenditure is unusual, non-typical, non-customary, and infrequently recurring. Third is the immediate recognition of the expenditure causes the utility serious financial harm or significantly distorts the current year's income. And four, the immediate recognition of the expenditure causes significant ratepayer impact. So we had a lot of good discussion on the record from the applicant in why it thinks that it's met some of the reasonable tests included in these criteria, and then again, from the interveners and from staff, offering kind of counterpoints to those. So our first decision point is the acceleration in forestry work spend deferral, where we're being asked to approve the applicant's request to defer an incremental amount up to $25 million for expanded forestry work. Our decision here is limited to the reasonableness of the deferral request. We are not considering whether to authorize recovery of these additional costs, as that issue would be taken up in a future rate proceeding. As I mentioned earlier, ensuring safe and reliable service is a major tenet of our mission, and here the record of evidence before us needs to demonstrate that this is a reasonable deferral request. In analyzing the reasonableness of it, there are several pieces of information in the record that I found compelling. First, Commission staff noted that per the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the emerald ash borer infestation was first detected in Wisconsin in 2008. Therefore, in my opinion, the applicant has had multiple opportunities in prior rate proceedings to proactively address its need for increased forestry activity spending. However, the applicant did not seek an increase to their forestry expenses until 2023. And in my opinion, again, failure to proactively plan on the applicant's part does not necessitate a crisis that the Commission must solve right now. Also, I think it's important to note that not authorizing the deferral today does not preclude the applicant from beginning accelerated forestry work now. It just means that treatment of these expenditures and their ability to recover them in rates will be taken up in a future proceeding. Further, given the unusual timing and the expansive nature of this request, reasonableness here includes thoughtful planning that demonstrates the specific work to address these forestry management issues, the timeline for undertaking the work in the remainder of 2024, and the expenses associated with the various aspects of the work. For me, this information is valuable and necessary to consider as part of my overall analysis of this deferral request. However, unfortunately, this information is not included in the record before us. And absent more detailed information, I'm not prepared to approve this acceleration in forestry work, the deferral for acceleration in forestry work at this time. I am open to hearing from my colleagues on this, but I could entertain a new alternative, so it would be alternative 4, which would be to take no action on this specific referral request today, which would leave the door open for the applicant to develop a more detailed plan that illustrates why this is needed for the remainder of 2024 and what these additional expenses will pay for. I envision more information, including a list of work activities, a schedule or timeline for when the work will be completed, and an outline of the costs associated with this plan. Although I can't forecast what my final decision would be, if I was presented with that additional information, it would definitely provide more information that may increase the reasonableness of this deferral request. So, to discuss that item specifically, we will hear from Commissioner Nieto and Commissioner Hawkins now.
Thanks, Chair Strand. I came in at a do not authorize this particular $25 million acceleration item for many of the same reasons you described. Just a couple of thoughts. From a practical stance, I've seen how some of these hazard tree issues impact the utility. So working with the utilities, I've been a point of contact when outages happen and tracking the outages throughout evenings and weekends and that kind of thing, and have seen hazard trees fall from outside of the right-of-way and the impact that that has. You know, from that perspective, reading WEPCO's application, I could see how, in particular, the emerald ash borer, combining with the severe weather, really is creating an escalating threat or an escalating cost issue that has kind of escalated since previous rate cases and that kind of thing. But also looking at this, the actual removal of emerald ash borer or ash hazard trees or ash hazard tree limbs is really only maybe 10 to 20% of the budget of this $25 million, or maybe a $6 million amount. Reading into the data request, it wasn't quite clear to me what that amount was and what those time periods were. The information there wasn't incredibly precise, and I think that goes to your discussion of needing more information and a plan. And so I guess I would say I'm at a no for authorizing this amount. I'd be open to receiving some sort of plan and more precise information if there's enough time left in 2024 for the applicant to provide that and do that. But if we receive that information again, it would really need to pertain to ash trees and not to all species of trees, which are included in this. Because if you're looking at all species of trees clearing inside of the right-of-way, outside of the right-of-way, et cetera, that's recurring O&M, and that's not a deferral. There has to be some sort of information on the record showing that it's extraordinary per the Uniform System of Accounts and the SOP 9401. So that's where I'm at on this one.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Nieto. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm similarly aligned with both of you on this one. At Alt 3, do not approve applicant's request for deferral. And while I think additional information would certainly be helpful, I don't know if that would be enough to actually get to that standard of making a deferral the appropriate course. But of course, open to reviewing additional information. But I'm at do not approve.
Okay. I can join you guys at all three. Again, I think you make a good point about timing. I mean, it's late June, right? And I think, again, nothing that alternative 3 does not preclude the work from happening, and it also doesn't affect deferral and recoverability questions in a future proceeding. So I will join you guys there, but that means we can move on to our other decision items in this one. Okay, so our second alternative refers to the future storm damage referral, which is different than the last one and the next one. So for this one, the applicant is requesting to defer any future storm restoration costs incurred in 2024 in excess of the $8.5 million budgeted for storm recovery costs in 2024. So here I'll note that historically, utilities request deferral accounting treatment for weather-related events after the event has occurred, and not for events that could potentially happen in the future. The Commission historically has not granted preemptive weather-related deferrals for events that have not yet occurred. This is partially due to timing. Before a storm occurs, we don't know what we don't know. After the storm, we have much more information available to evaluate the known facts with the deferral evaluation criteria. So even though we know the budget's been blown, it doesn't mean we know enough to approve this, in my opinion, expansive request. And I want to note that even if we don't approve this future storm deferral today, the applicant is not precluded from seeking deferral should additional extraordinary storms occur in 2024, and that after that incident, that's the more appropriate time to consider a request for that. So therefore, on this one, I am at alternative 3, do not approve. Commissioner Neat.
Thank you, Chair Strand. I was at alternative 3, do not approve as well for the same reason, the same reasons you described. I would simply ask that the utility come back and request a deferral if there's an event that appears to meet SOP 9401. I just note, too, there was some discussion in this record about materiality thresholds and some of those kind of things. The Uniform System of Accounts essentially provides that there's a 5% of the utility's net income is more or less a threshold, and if we're under 5% of utilities' net income, separating out the extraordinary costs, then it's something the Commission has to look at on kind of a case-by-case basis. So that's something to keep in mind. And another thing with kind of a blanket request like this, in addition to what you've mentioned, is just that the requirements do not allow utilities to essentially aggregate incidents. So it's supposed to be case-by-case individual events that meet a materiality threshold, as opposed to an aggregated bucket of events that occurred throughout the year. So for all of those reasons, I was at alt 3. Thanks.
Great points. Thank you very much. Commissioner Hawkins?
I am at alternative 3 on this one as well, and agree with all the comments that the two of you have laid out.
Thank you. Okay, our next decision item is about the costs associated specifically with the January 12th through 14th, 2024 storm, and asks if we should approve the deferral of the storm cost of approximately $9.5 million. So here I believe that it's important to recognize that we know what the applicant's budget is for storm restoration in 2024, $8.5 million, and we know that there was a single storm event in the first 2 weeks of 2024 that exceeded this budget for the entire year. So coupled with the fact that the costs are unusual and outside of control of the utility, it could lead me to believe that a deferral specifically for the January storm damage is reasonable. But given a lot of the discussion that we just had, I'm curious to hear from Commissioner Nieto and Commissioner Hawkins on this one as well.
Yep, for this one, I appreciated staff looking for a way to thread the needle or looking for a way to give us another alternative, and that's always helpful. I think in this particular case, this option just doesn't get us there. I don't want to say it kind of brings out the worst of both worlds, but it kind of has negatives all around in terms of how deferrals are supposed to work, the SOP, where we're at with just regular budgets and the regulatory and rate-making framework and that kind of thing. It just didn't get there for me at all. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Nieto. Commissioner Hawkins?
Similar to Commissioner Nieto, I was at alternative 2 here on do not approve the deferral, and for all the reasons, all the thresholds that must be demonstrated to grant a deferral, we seem to be far from several of those, so I was at alternative 2.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Commissioner Nieto, for your comment about threading the needle and trying to find, maybe a little bit of a different way to handle some of these things that have already happened. But I think, again, given our discussion about deferral request reasonableness criteria as a whole, it's hard to approve this one in light of the reasons for not approving the other ones. So I can join you guys at 2 on this one. And that means that we do not have to weigh in on carrying costs and conditions because those are only applicable if deferrals are approved. So that actually ends our discussion of this item. So we can get a motion on that one too, please. And thank you both for your comments on this. This is a tricky one.
Thank you. In docket 6630 AF 101, I move we deny the company's accounting deferral requests.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that does conclude our official business for today. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, July 11th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. May I have a motion to adjourn?
We went right into.
You want to do this one and then go back to the two?
Yeah, before we adjourn, sorry, I thought
I rescind my motion to adjourn. We will,
we need
Go
motions
back
on the
to
other
16
two
and
check-off
17.
items
Yes.
that got skipped.
thank you. Good catch.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So we'll do 16, 17, and then we'll do the motion to adjourn, just so everything's clear.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good, thanks. All right, in docket 5GF 268, I move we approve the impact of the renewable portfolio standard for 2021 and 2022, the draft report for submission to the governor and the legislature.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And in docket 5RF 2023, I move we accept the reports of the Wisconsin electric providers and aggregators regarding compliance with the state statutory requirements of the RPS and direct the Division of Energy Regulation and Analysis to inform each electric provider and aggregator of its or its members' compliance with the statute.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we actually have concluded our official business now. Again, our open meeting next is scheduled July 11th, 2024 at 10:30. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn until Thursday, July 11, 2024 at 10:30 a.m.
Aye. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We're adjourned.